The Morning Brew podcast with Jaffe and Razor, sponsored by Berkshire Bank Home Lending, where you borrow matters. Well, I'm not much of a singer, but if I was, I might serenade you, Razor, as we welcome you into Morning Brew with Jaffe and Razor with Kenny Rogers, the gambler. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when, what was it? Know when to walk away.
Know when to run.
Know when to run. Now, I'm not going to run, but I'm definitely going to avoid talking about the Bruins' loss in Dallas, 6-1. One of the homes of one Andrew Razor Raycroft. I don't think this was the curse of Razor by any stretch of the imagination, but it was definitely not a wonderful effort as the Bruins fall 6-1. Tyler Seguin with a couple of goals. The Bruins started out okay in this game. Okay, fine. All those, I can use all those. It was okay. It was road game early on. Couple of chances, couldn't capitalize. And then after about the first 10-minute mark of the first period, it became some giveaways, and they couldn't keep up with the transitional speed of the Dallas Stars. So they end up losing this game. Linus Ullmark gets pulled, Razor. Jeremy Swayman gets back in. But instead of talking about the game in particular, because there's really shit to talk about, really, let's talk about the first half of this team, all right? And then we'll talk about, we got some questions, some great questions that came in from the listeners. And I was actually going to maybe have Sophia come and join us. I don't know if she's going to get in on time, though, back and everything. She has some very curious definitions of dessert food that we were getting into off air tonight. Came on air a little bit too, so I thought maybe we could have it. But maybe we'll save Sophia and her Sophia-ness, okay, for another time.
That's a good call. Having Sophia on would be awesome.
Yes, we will. We will have her on. She has some unique takes on certain things, and that's why we love Sophia. And it's probably time that we had Sophia. We had a Dale visit. I'm not sure if Barry could figure out how to connect with us, so maybe that would have to wait another time. All right. First, how was your weekend? We haven't talked in a couple of days. I know you did some college hockey. How was your gig?
I did. It was good. The Connecticut ice. So they're trying to recreate a bean pot down in Connecticut. I was able to watch 4 college hockey games, which is difficult compared to the NHL and knowing who the NHL players are. There's a lot of homework involved. It was pretty good hockey. Good job. Blizzard, survived the blizzard this weekend. Mm-hmm. Can't believe how much snows at my house now. Checked in on the Bruins Friday night. Good win by Ullmark. Go back to Ullmark just quickly. End of the road trip was not good today against the Dallas Stars, but solid weekend for myself.
Right.
Exhausted.
And who won the Connecticut ice? Who ended up winning that?
Quinnipiac, my wife's alma mater. She still can't believe there's a hockey team that's number 2 nationally ranked in the country at her former school, because when she was there wasn't much of an athletic program, but it certainly changed. They got by the skin of their teeth on Saturday and then dominated today.
Yeah, Rand Pecknold has been there now over 20 years. He may even be pushing 25 to 30. I don't remember my years well, but he's been there in a long time. Former college home of one Connor Clifton. His brother Tim Clifton played there too. I did a handful of Quinnipiac games as well. All right, well, congratulations to Quinnipiac. Speaking of the Bean Pot, by the way, coming up February 7th and 14th at TD Garden, you and I will be part of the Nesson crew doing that.
Yeah, right, and after doing just quickly, I was thinking of you the entire day today after doing those games. We only had 5 minutes of overtime, and then they went to shootout. So for you to do the triple overtime games back to back, Oh, mamacita.
Yeah, those sucked. They were
The
fun,
sleep
but
you need. The sleep you need after that. Holy, that's a lot of talking.
it was a lot of talking. Thankfully, I'm
Yeah.
full of a lot of hot air, and Tom Karen is equally as adept at the gift of gab. All right, so the Bruins are at 42 games,
Yeah.
you know, and they are still trending for 100 and well, it was 106. Now it's 103 or 4 points. They should be firmly established in the playoffs. Getting into the playoffs, though, shouldn't be their goal. That should be their first step. I guess without just doing the old, what do we think of the Bruins first half? Let's just go. Let's get a little more specific. Best quality of the Bruins in this first half and the most glaring weakness in this first half. Can you answer that? And again, we don't really prepare, as I'm sure you can tell, folks. So I'm asking Razor these off the cuff, and I'm trying to stall to give him another 20 seconds or so
No,
to gather his thought. But
but
is
it's
there
always better. That's
you
why the
know,
show's so great, because we just
we
throw
shoot the
something at
shit,
each other that we're not expecting. Yeah.
right? So
It,
best,
it's
so best quality of this team is what?
the best quality is that they're on pace for 106 points, and we've gone to the habit of these 5-1 after one period deficits, this 6-1 hammering by the Dallas Stars, the start that this team had, and do they have these pieces come together, and all of those things combined, they're still on pace for 100 plus points. They're in a position in a really tough Eastern Conference. And I think that's distorting the view of this Bruins team a little bit, in how good Carolina is, how good Florida is, and the fact that they're in 7th place in the conference, but they're a really good hockey team. So I think that their strength through this first half is that they've hung around and they've separated themselves and put themselves in a position where they can dictate how the next 40 games go. Now, on the flip side, I'm going to go right away to the
Uh-huh.
deficit that this team has is very similar to the same thing, is that they aren't in the top 2 teams. They aren't ready from our point of view to go on a massive run, to win 16 times in the playoffs over a 28 game stretch, and that's also, so the good and the bad really go hand in hand for me, and we dissect this and go back and forth on our show every couple weeks. It feels like, where it's like, man, does this team have it? And then they win 5 in a row and you're like, oh, they feel, if they're in a good spot, but they still need something else. And then they lose 3 in a row and it's like, well, they're not playing very well, but they have these 2, 3, 4 good things going for them. So it just feels like we're really in limbo with this organization, the team at this point.
Well, yeah, and limbo is not a fun feeling, never for me at least. And I'm a
Hmm.
type A,
Yep.
so especially for somebody like me, limbo actually leads to like those moments of internal panic, like
Yes.
because you're dangling. Some people are comfortable with the unknown. I'm not, and I look at this team and I'm not that. I like, probably because I like them because we're around them so much. We cover them. We internally root for them to be successful, and I think we know that they have some good elements to it. But I really want to buy in, and I'm having a harder time doing it, especially given the results against the Carolinas. Now I know they beat Florida. I know they did, but the Tampas they beat too. But I sit there in the back of my head and I say, could they really do it over a 7-game series? And I want to think that they could, but I don't know, Razor. They not right now. I don't see it. And so okay. Here's my take on them. Their strengths: they have some character guys. They have some stars who have done an awful lot of good for them. But I think the strength is actually that they're finding depth with the team up front. No question. Good stuff. And they got to get healthy, blah, 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 that stuff. Fine. Their weakness, I don't think it's even close. Their back end. It's the back end. You
Hmm.
can't win in the playoffs without a really strong back end. I'm almost to the point, with that said, and I'm jumping ahead here, but I'm going to do it. I'm almost to the point. Don't trade for a center. for second line center. Trade for 2 defensemen.
And
Make
for
your
anyone
focus on the
not
D.
watching YouTube right now, I'm rubbing my hands together because that's where I wanted to go. And we're not going to talk about today's game. But Eric Halla not being in the lineup, is it a coincidence they get smoked 6-1? I think we need to give this guy a little bit of love, and we've been reluctant to do it. I maybe been a little bit more excited about him, but having him out of the lineup, I think we see that nothing works quite right. Nothing worked quite right, and it's a one-game sample. I'm not jumping to conclusions, but I'm with you 100%. I'm not concerned nearly as much about second-line center as I am with the back end at this point.
Yeah, I think that the inability at times to physically withstand the opponent's forecheck, to eliminate it with a body contact, a seal, and a breakout type of play. You know what I mean? Like that type of what do they? We always say the defenseman's play, kill the defenseman's responsibility, kill the play, start it up. You know, that type of thing. We don't see that enough. We don't, and I think that has to be addressed. Yeah, if they don't get another top 9 forward, maybe they could also have some issues. Sure. Yeah, but I'll tell you what, I think they have a better chance of doing anything more if they address the back end significantly. 2 pieces, bud. 2 pieces. And then stick with what they got up front. Health being the obvious thing. So that's where I'm at with it. Is that possible now? Rhetorically asking. Well, I don't know, because one of your assets that you think you're going to trade is Jake DeBrusk, right? You think you're going to trade him, and yet, I mean,
he's a top 9 forward for this team right now.
Now he's a top, exactly.
So that does take something away from what you have up front. And I'll ask you, with it being only halfway, because that's the kicker too. At the end of January, running into the All-Star break, usually we're at 55 games at this point.
Yeah.
We're only halfway. So when's the pressure point? When do you think the pressure point is? Because we've already had Jake DeBrusk dealing with this, and we talked about it at the Christmas break, which is now a month ago, that maybe there's going to be pressure coming out of this. Maybe there's phone calls being made. Certainly that hasn't been the case. There's been nothing going through the league, no trades, no nothing. When's the pressure point for this league? And are we waiting all the way till March 21st? And if we are, then we're going to be in limbo for quite a while.
And I kind of feel like this team can't afford to be waiting that long to do something. They can do more at the trade deadline. I think that the whole size, aggressiveness, back end question marks, one of those have to be addressed before March 21st at 3:00 Eastern time. That's when the trade deadline is this year. Because you're talking 6 weeks, technically, right? 6 full weeks till the trade deadline.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. I think that, I still think the goaltending is going to work itself out. Of course, this whole Tuukka thing is not happening at a good time. You get Swayman back up. My guess is, by the way, that he'll start on Tuesday against Seattle. We won't see Tuukka till after the All-Star break. That's my guess. And by the way, can Tuukka even get work during what's allowed during the All-Star break? Can he go to Providence he'd have to go on a conditioning stint, right?
Is he going to cancel his vacation?
Don't know. It's a good question. It's a valid question.
I don't for me, and I know there's questions about the goaltending, and this is part of the deal. This was part of the deal with the devil they made. And again, it's 40 games. I checked into the Morning Bru Twitter and who's playing game 1 of the playoffs. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on that one. Like, that's a long ways away. We're not there in any way whatsoever. And similar to the whole Jeremy Swayman panic, like sending him to the minors, he's already back, gang. He's already back. He's going to play probably on Tuesday night. He's going to play again in February. He's going to play in March. He's playing games both in Providence, in the NHL the rest of the way. Let's just get that out of the way. That's happening.
I know, but fans don't want to hear, "Hey guys, take a deep breath." They don't.
No, I know. No one likes limbo. No one. I get it. I truly do get it. I'm just this is going to happen, and this is part of the process. And they knew this bringing Tuukka back was going to be a push and pull a little bit. I'm sure they expected him to at least get to the All-Star break. Yes, but Linus Ullmark's been good too. So you also go to like, did Linus? Getting pulled tonight was a bit of a mercy pull. Mm-hmm. He played really good in Colorado, played really good in Phoenix. Should he play Tuesday? And I know there's the Swaymans coming in and playing on Tuesday, but as a starting goaltender, you also want to play on Tuesday and get back in the net. So there's a little bit of limbo in the net as well. And we're talking through this. It's really fast. I agree with you. I think Swayman plays at home, but it's just an interesting pull and tug going on in between the pipes as well. Really,
it's a good point. No, it's an interesting point. Do they go back to him because none of the goals in the Dallas game were goaltender's fault? Even the one where Linus got spinning around like a top, a spinning top when the puck went from the right side and Heiskanen then got his way all the way over to the left wall, and then he zipped it to the front, and Glendening tipped it in. It wasn't so much a good look, but there's Linus didn't get over, and it wasn't. I'm not putting it on the goalie. No, that's not that.
No,
and it happens in the NHL. It just did, and you got to deal with it. I don't put it on Linus though.
No, I agree, and it's happening. I mean, we've talked about it a few times, just the high-scoring games that are happening around the National Hockey League on a nightly basis right now. And that's a whole nother podcast, whether it's the play, whether it's the talent on the ice, whether it's the lack of talent on the ice, whether it's the schedule, whether it's COVID. There's a bunch of different reasons why, but there's blowouts every night. There's teams giving up 7 goals every single night.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't just – listen, there's shit nights for other teams too.
Yes.
I mean, it just happens. Now, as you mentioned, the Colorados, the Floridas, the Tampas, less, but not always. I mean, there are teams, Tampa's scrambling to get back into games. Pittsburgh, that has been this great team, is having to make comebacks. And, then they lose to Seattle, who, by the way, is the Bruins' next game. I mean, it's happening. With all that said, though, getting back to the Bruins in the first half, if we look at this team, what have we learned from them? Have we learned that they are resilient enough? Have we learned that they are confident enough, despite the fact that they're still in that limbo-ness, as you put? Have we learned that they have enough of the it factor, is maybe the way to ask, that it gives us enough confidence with some changes, and we don't know what those would be yet, but I guess the question is this, Razor. Do they have a legit chance to do something? Where are we at on that? And I know we're projecting 3 months out, but we have to. It's what we do.
And I think I go back to, again, being positive. I really, truly do. I think when the playoffs shake out and you look at the top 8 teams in this Eastern Conference, as much as you want to praise Carolina, as much as we want to praise Florida, do either of those teams want to play the Boston Bruins in the first round? And would they rather play the Washington Capitals? Would they rather play the New York Rangers? And can those other teams sustain it? Would they rather play the Toronto Maple Leafs? And when I ask that question to myself, and you can answer it as well, I think they would rather play the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think they would rather play the New York Rangers. I think they would rather play the Washington Capitals at this point, because those teams are all flawed in different ways as well. And yes, they've come out and they've scored maybe more goals at times. They've gone on a hotter run than the Bruins, But when it comes down to that 7-game series, and you have guys like Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron and Charlie McAvoy in your lineup, and you assume they add a few pieces, that's a tough out for other teams. And I think that the league still looks at the Bruins in that respect.
Maybe. I'll tell you the team that doesn't fear about playing them. They respect them. They don't fear is Tampa. Tampa's shown that they can, even though they don't have their
care
quote
about
unquote
anybody.
third line, they don't care about anybody, but they don't. Florida to me is the team that might, even though they're having a great run at it this year, that would still wonder, they'd probably get a bit nervous about that. Carolina to me, I think they feel different this year. I do. I think they feel different. I think they feel like they've gone from, little brother to, okay, they're at least the same age, so to speak now, or they're the little brother that is now all of a sudden 6'3" and big brother is 6'1". And remember when you used to think 6'1" was huge and now you're 6'3", 220 and you're dominating. So I just think that's what Carolina's got. And I think a lot of that, by the way, has to do with their head coach, Rod Brindamore. I think he's instilled confidence and it has taken years, but he's done that. I do.
So,
mhm.
Can we do a little exercise here? Because we're talking in relation to what if the Bruins were in the Western Conference and it was nothing but the Colorado Avalanche and maybe the Vegas Golden Knights? Would we have a different perspective on this team if we line them up in the entire league where they're at? Does that change things for you?
Sure, a little bit. I would think so because now maybe it's recency kind of, bias or recency of seeing Nashville come to town where they were good, they were physical. By the way, Razor, I'd be concerned of a 7-game series with Nashville just with them hammering the Bruins in their physical play. But you beat them and you say, okay, you can skate with them. Minnesota to me is a bit of a I know they've got a nice winning percentage, but they're
they
a
end
bit
up
of
winning, right? They end up winning,
yeah,
but it's the
but it doesn't feel the same. Like, I don't look at them and be like, "Oh, I'm shaking in my boots from them." Anaheim, with all due respect, Dallas Eakins and his staff, a nice job, but no, LA, I give Todd McClellan credit there. But no, you're right. I mean, the Calgarys, the St. Louis's, et cetera, the Dallases, even though I know they beat the Bruins pretty good. But you're talking Dallas, San Jose. No, probably not as much because you've got 3 teams, if not 4, depending on what you think of, either a New York or a Pittsburgh in the East that are pretty damn good. I mean, the East is really, the top 8 is really, really good. The top 4 is excellent.
They are. They're very good and they're very strong. And the President Cup winner never wins unless you're Tampa Bay.
All right. Well, yeah, that's true. So, but I think we agree. The Bruins it's a nice story, but they're flawed right now, and they need to fix them. And everybody knows it. The question is what's it going to take to get something going? Part of the issue is, what do the Bruins have to move? Well, I still say they have some repetitive assets on the back end. The question is, well, wait a second, is somebody else going to find some of these assets attractive enough to make a big trade for something else? That's the big question right now. Are the Bruins going to be willing to give up a little bit more to get something that is pretty significant? Because they need that. That's what they're going to need to do. And the question is it the right thing to do, giving up another top pick, giving up a high prospect? And the Bruins right now only have a few of those high-end guys that they're hoping to move or hoping to make the Bruins in the next couple of years. I'd be reticent to move some of those guys, Razor.
I agree with that. We talked about it last season. I'm not a draft pick guy.
Right.
I feel if you can add an NHL player to your lineup, any draft pick's worth it just because of the lottery of that draft. And the Bruins still, no matter how poorly the second half goes, they're not going to be in a position to draft an impact player out of the gates this season. They're going to be down in the bottom half of the draft again. That's just where they're at. So I understand the idea of first round picks, but I also have been around hockey a long time and have gone through it with a bunch of first round picks that flamed out and that didn't make it. So whenever you can add an NHL player to your roster that you can keep, that you can control a little bit, I'm all for that. And I think Charlie Coyle is a good example of that. in getting guys in here where you can sign them and keep them. But there has to be there, and every team's doing it. That's the beauty of it too. That everyone's trying to find a way to also compete now, but also keep their teams intact for 3-4 years. And it's a really dicey battle, and the Bruins are in the middle of that right now. And unfortunately, they don't have 5 pieces in the minors. That's
Right.
that's the luxury that other teams have that they don't, where you have 5 guys that are ready, chomping at the bit. Some of these guys haven't stepped up, and whether that's taken the Bruins spots that they want them to take, or just become assets in general. And I think that is the bigger issue at hand. It's not necessarily what this team is, it's how do they get somebody to make them better.
No. Yeah, and again, I go back to this. It's more than just somebody. I think they need some bodies. I do. 2 or 3 to do that. And that's going to probably make the task even tougher. Let's rip through some of these questions or comments. I may not even get to every name. We've already touched on some of these too. So to
Oh,
save
just give
some
me a couple
time,
good names, though. Give me the good ones that you're not quite sure of. You have to rip
I
those
know.
ones
Yeah,
down.
it's okay. I will. Here's one. Well, this is an easy one. Big Billy Peaks. He wants to know about revisit, and that's not me, even though that could be me with the way that I've been eating
That
lately.
should be
Although
you. Big
I
Billy. That should be your
okay.
handle.
Quick story, true story, very true. If I told you this, stop it. Okay. So when you used to go to play in Chicago, do you remember Gibsons Steakhouse? Do you remember Gibsons at
Oh,
all
yeah,
by chance?
absolutely. Right on the corner, right on, yeah, absolutely. Right in the
Right.
mix, a little
Okay.
piano in the front.
Exactly. Okay, so Gibson Steakhouse, right in the heart of what's also affectionately known, it's Rush Street, Russian Division.
Yep.
It's also known
Pancake
the
House across the
Viagra.
street.
What's that?
Pancake
W?
House across the
Oh, the
street.
Pancake House.
Ooh.
Pancake
Oh,
House, outstanding.
oh,
Great
so good.
Dutch apple pancakes.
Oh,
Oh my God, you would eat one of those for breakfast. Which, by the
after.
way, tying it all back, but Sophia thinks that pancakes really should be more dessert than breakfast. She's messed
Mm.
up. We got to get her on the show. I got to call her out on all this shit. Okay. But so Gibson's, before I was back in hockey years ago, I was in the food business, legit in the food, selling to restaurants, hotels, etc. I had my own small company doing some other stuff. Long story short, I became a good customer of Gibson's Steakhouse, and it's a iconic Chicago steakhouse. And I would go into the kitchen once every week or two, talk to the chefs and the people up there, and they make these massive desserts. I don't know if you remember, but the desserts were like you'd get full wedges of cake that were of carrot cake or of mud pie or whatever that were like
A foot high.
this. Foot is not just mammoth, okay? And they'd serve like 8 people. Anyways, so one day I went in there and I was talking to the chef, but then also the woman who made all the desserts and stuff. And I'm like, you know what I love? I love a white cake with kind of a white frosting, and raspberry or strawberry filling and a this and a that. And she said, "Oh, that sounds good." And Chef Mike was his name. And Mike said, "Oh, that sounds really good and simple." I said, "Yeah, you know what? It's sweet, but it's light, if that makes sense. And you eat it after you have your 22-ounce steak, because I never shortchange myself on steak. Anybody who eats an 8-ounce filet, I'm sorry, that's not a steakhouse. That's a waste. Go there and get a ribeye or a New York strip. Go. Don't freaking waste your time getting a medium rare filet with a little sauce on it. There's no
No
flavor.
fat.
Go have your steak,
Nothing to it.
enjoy it." Anyways, sure as shit. Again, no bullshit. I go in there for dinner, and it's weeks later, and I think it's around my birthday, and I'm with my then girlfriend, no longer my girlfriend, not even my wife. I mean, gone, just a girlfriend from the past. And we go there, and they bring out the dessert thing, and on the card it said, we got this, we got the mud pie, we've got the famous New York, it's a Chicago style carrot cake at Gibson's, and then down it said Big Billy's cake, and I said, "Big Billy's cake." And I'm looking at it, and it's a white cake with white frosting and flakes and this and that, and it was strawberries inside the middle, and the strawberry raspberry sauce, and I'm like, holy shit! And I said to the waiter, I'm like, "Big Billy's cake." This is named after me. This is, this is
I'm not
this
paying for this.
exactly. Well, and it was just coincidence that they ran it that week. She made Big Bill. They called it Big Billy's Cake because that was my nickname
Oh
when I
boy,
came to visit. Big
Big
Billy's Cake.
Billy's cake. I mean,
Yes. So
it's locked in now.
and
That
it was a
is
good seller, but it was only a special cake there. So anyways, so here we go. Big Billy wants to know about. I'm going to revisit the question I asked earlier this year. He said, "Is there legitimate concerns for team toughness here? The lack of responses here and there." Um, we've talked about that before. Razor, I think there is a concern about the lack of overall size on the team. Bigger doesn't mean better, but with the right type of size, the right type of players, you get bigger as a team. And I do think that there's a concern with me. I won't speak for you from lack of size on the back end. I do, and even up front a little bit. I'd like a little bit more. I would.
yes. I want more on the back end. There's no question on the back end. You see the blueprint for the teams that have been in the Final Four the last 3, 4, 5 years. It's big, strong, tough defensemen that can haul a lot of minutes. Um, the tougher part of it is hard for the Bruins because they tried to address it with Frederick and Foligno, and both of those guys are out. And we talked about on the last show, addressing that is very difficult for them with those two guys injured and how long they're going to be out. And what do you do with those guys? You
By the way,
can't
they're
get
both
rid of those
skating.
guys.
They're both
So
skating. You know,
get those guys in the lineup. Do they play the second half of the year? If both of those guys in the lineup, then there's someone ready to drop the gloves and be tougher that everybody wants. And if you have size on the back end to complement that, problem solved. The issue is keeping those guys in the lineup. It's an issue when those two are definitely on the lineup. But to your point, it's two separate things. When people are talking tougher and bigger, tougher is in the organization. Bigger on the back end is not.
yeah, I agree. They need bigger, and I think they need guys that can make not only the opponent pay, but I think they need to make them guys in the back end take more ice, take more space, close. You see the Heiskanen and the Klingbergs, you see the Vegas D and the Carolina D. The length of them is significant.
Yes.
I think it's Demian Mello. Any chance that Kevin Miller comes back? I'm not going to read the rest of it. Thank you. No, not going to happen. But thank you for joining the show. Here we go. Mr. Anti-Socialite wants to know, he says, love the show, blah, blah, blah. The team, he says, had frustrating difficulty time clearing the puck out of the D zone lately and have shown few signs of improvement in that area. What can be done to address this? Is it a matter of simplifying the game? I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're already talking about. I think it's shutting off plays before they're deep into the zone, before being hemmed into their own zone. I think it's about getting pucks, and then it's a cohesive effort between D and forward too on breakouts. But I think when it's all said and done, I think it comes back to the D being put into spots that are uncomfortable because, again, I keep saying it, I think it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Just playing a little bit above their heads on the backside at times.
Yeah. Here's one from Mike Boston. We've had him on, Boss, before. He's contributed before. If the Bruins go all in this year to try and win the Cup, trading picks and young players, do you think they could avoid the problems that this would cause in the future? As Boston is a great market and could attract good UFA players, I don't know. There's a fine line. I know, Razor, you just talked about your view on getting an NHL player currently right now. The other thing that this team has to look at in the next year, 2 years is we know that Bergeron's almost done. Eventually, we know that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I mean, Tuukka is going to be sooner rather than later. We got to get through just the next week, but you know what I mean, whether it's this year, next year. How much longer do you have with Brad Marchand? He's an everything player, special player. How much longer do you have? This is that fine line, the fine balance that you've got to balance or figure out if you're Don Sweeney.
It is, and it comes down to the center position. When you have a young centerman, it's much easier to wheel and deal rather than when you have an old centerman. So there's certainly they can't just get rid of everybody, meaning prospects. Now, the fact that they've been so good for so long and they're drafting so low down the board, it does turn into more of a lottery. That's my point with that. And don't forget, they hit Patrice Bergeron in the second round. They've hit Marchand in the late round. They hit David Pasternak way down in the first round. So that's where some of that fortune comes into the team. They're not picking in the top 5-8. I would not want to trade a lottery pick away. That's
No,
my
can't.
point. I'm not trading a lottery pick away, but at this point where they're at, can you get somebody and it's up to the scouts. It's up to the guys overseas. It's up to the pro scouts to find that guy, that gem. And that's really hard to do. I'm not making that light of that, but that's where the Bruins are at right now.
Yeah, I think that this is where they're going to have to hit on some of these other kids, though. After the first round, I do between the second, I mean
Yep.
seventh round, sure, but let's call the second through fifth round. I think they're going to have to, they're going to have to step that aspect up and start. And I do think that's where you can take a chance on drafting the size factor, giving those players usually a few years to grow into the body as well, instead of having to have that real mature young player come in at 18 or 19 years old that is already more usually physically more mature. And that's what makes those players ready to play at 18 or 19. Take the kid that is going to, grow into that 6'4" frame, and they may end up being 225, but they're only 182 right now. That type of thing. They're going to have to find some more of that. Speaking of a potential trade, too, here's one or two more before we wrap it up. Skip Thomas. What kind of trade asset is Jeremy Swayman? Could he be in a package for somebody like Chychrun or Hurdle? Skip says he loves the podcast, and he says that Sway is great, but he feels that you need to go all in this year. And I think that's more than before even ask you about Swayman's trade potential, because that's also already been thrown out there. But when do you determine if you're going all in or not? And by the way, if you don't go all in, does that affect somebody like a guy like Patrice Bergeron deciding if he comes back or not next year? Or do you have that talk with him and say, hey, look, we love you. We want you. We need you to come back. But we don't think we should go all in this year because the team probably isn't there yet. It probably isn't there.
Well, I think Patrice is at a point in his career where he's not necessarily deciding whether the team's all in. It's a personal decision whether he's able to play, and at this level, I think he still loves it. You see his compete level on a nightly basis. I don't think he's not going to play next year, whether or not the Bruins go all in on the deadline. Now, I do believe that Jeremy Swayman is an interesting piece, an interesting asset, and probably the most valuable asset that the Bruins have. And
I'd
then
agree.
I'll pose the question to you on the backside of it. Is it easier to find a goaltender somewhere on the planet that can play for this team? Or or a second line center, or a large, big defenseman that they could lock up?
Well, right now, if capital I, capital F, Tuukka ends up being okay health wise, and he gets his game rounded into form, and you get a deal that you can't refuse because there's a team out there that's really rebuilding, really looking at it and saying, oh, a kid like a Jeremy Swayman could be a cornerstone for us, and they're willing to move something significant. How do you not consider it? I like Jeremy.
Mm-hmm.
I like him a lot. I do. I like him a lot at the right time. I do. But because where I see the bees are being, to use your term, limbo-ish kind of there. I think you have to consider everything. I do. And I think right now he does have the most, he's been viewed the most at the NHL level for other young players.
Mm-hmm.
He has produced at the highest level too. And he carries a very high, and rightfully so, incredibly high image out there. He's got a wonderful personality. and he's a heck of a young goalie. With all that said, how do you not consider something, right, Razor? As far as I'm concerned. But what could he get you? Could he get you something? The key to that trade in this hypothetical never world that we're dealing with right here is, do you get that asset for multiple years that you're getting back? That is not a player you're getting for 1.5 years. No freaking way.
No way. This is a piece that you deal with to get something very good. That is going to be, that's 26 years old. That's with your organization for a while. So
26
the
years
question
old, that's
was,
under
do you
contract
trade
for 3
Swayman?
more years?
And the answer is you do, because you're actually the position you have at strength more than any other is actually goaltending at this point with this organization. And also, there's so many guys in the league. There's so many guys in the world that you can bring a guy like Ilya Sorokin in. There's lots of guys playing in the world that you can fill into your position, but it's gotta be perfect and it's gotta be great reward.
Yeah. But you have to entertain it. I think where the Bruins are at right now. If you can get Boku return, hey, you got to. And that goes for just about everybody on the team. With that said,
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap up this Morning Brew with Jaffe and Razor. Fun show. Talking about some things besides a less than fun game. Bruins lose to Dallas 6-1. They finished the road trip 1-1-1. The worst part of this road trip ending for the Boston Bruins is that the players are going to get home at about 2 or 3 a.m. and they're going to have, unless people were very kind and cleaned off their cars, they're going to have to clean off their cars after the nice storm that we had here. Who knows? Maybe they were protected. Maybe they were covered somewhere. I don't think they have that at Hanscom, but maybe they do. We also want to thank Berkshire Bank. We talked about them before. You heard their name at the beginning. They've jumped on and joined us and Nesson as the presenting sponsor for Morning Brew with Jaffe and Razor. And so just remember, Berkshire Bank doing some great things. And as we like to say here, the Morning Brew podcast with Jaffe and Razor, sponsored by Berkshire Bank Home Lending, your one-stop shop for any of your home financing needs. Give them a check, give them a look. Thanks again to Berkshire Bank. Razor, go get some rest. And I got a busy week. Our next scheduled show is after Tuesday's game against the Seattle Kraken. We're going to give you a show then. And I think, Razor, you and I got to talk about, I think we're going to give you a show right around the All-Star break, just to kind of set things, reset again, keep in touch with all the Bruins fans out there, the fans of Morning Brew. And then after that, we'll have a schedule for February as we'll get going. Have a great night, Razor. We'll talk with you in the next day or so. And everybody out there, have a wonderful day despite the Bruins loss. Let's see if they can get a win on Tuesday before we head to the All-Star break. Everybody have a great, safe day. And as always, enjoy that coffee.